Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire. I'm so glad you're here and I'm very excited about today's video because it's been a couple weeks in the making. I have a lot to share. First, I'm going to show you some batch creating that I did of 3 sets of cards, and then I'm going to share with you some things that are on big time sale over at Concord and Ninth. In fact, everything I'm using today is on sale over at Concord and Ninth, and some of it is 70% off. So I thought this was a perfect time to share this video that I've been working on. So after we create a bunch of cards, I will show you some products that are on big time sale and also some projects that I've made using them with links to the videos showing much more. Now I had to batch create 3 sets of cards for various things that I've needed cards for lately: graduation, retirement, teacher cards, and much more. So I thought I would film my batch creating process to share tips with you. Now, if batch creating isn't your jam, don't worry. A lot of these tips work great when creating just 1 or 2 cards also. Batch creating is something that I really enjoy doing, but I put a lot of effort into each so that each card is very special when the recipient gets it. Okay, let's start out with the floral cards. I'm going to make a handful of these. Now, several weeks ago, I was on a live with Concord and Ninth, and I showed a card that I completed, but I didn't show the process of making it, and many people have asked me to do a video on it. Well, I was going to be making a bunch of these, so now is a great time to share how. So this is the card I made many weeks ago, and I'm going to make more of them today, but I'll change up some of the colors along the way. Believe it or not, the way this product is designed, it is very easy to assemble this. Now, I put a lot of dimension onto this because I love that dimension, but you could skip some of that dimension if you prefer. And this is a fun shaped card. Okay, so the die set that I use for this is the Concord and Ninth Primrose die set. This die set is fantastic. Now, it has everything you need to create this card. All you have to do is add a sentiment. I will say that what is really special about this die set is that large image on the bottom. It has a piercing floral pattern that you use as a map on where to glue down all of your die cuts. By the way, I keep all my dies on a really heavyweight magnetic board from Lawn Fawn. That's where all my dies are now. When I batch process a card or batch create, I will put all the dies on that magnetic sheet so I don't lose them as I'm creating. Another thing that I always have on hand when I am batch creating is containers. Now, there are different types of containers you can use, but what I've loved lately are the Spellbinders craft stacks. There's the large, which is in the middle, and the other are the medium size. These do have lids that like kind of snap on and fit on nicely. I don't have the lids on them at the moment, but they do stack wonderfully. Great for storage and great for batch creating and keeping everything tidy. Before we move on, I do want to give you another closer look at this die. What's really special about this die set from Concord and Ninth is that die that does the piercing, which gives you kind of a roadmap of where to glue everything down. But you can also just use that die like on the center of a background, and it's a fun pierced floral detail background that you can use for anything. Just use it as a background. So there's multiple uses for this die set. And again, it is on sale right now, which is fantastic. All right, now that I've shown you some of the key things I like to have when I'm batch creating, let's start doing some die cutting. One of my key tips for batch creating or mass producing is to die cut as much as you can on the plate at once. Instead of just doing this piece and running it through, I'm going to also add onto my plate some gold that I need to cut out and some berries that I need to cut out. So I'm really filling up that plate. So when I take the time to run this through my die cut machine, it's going to cut a lot of things at once. I use the Empress die cut machine, which is electric, so I can just put the plates in and it'll feed through, and while it's feeding through, I can get the next step ready. It also has that magnetic plate there, which holds the dies and cardstock in place as I, get them ready to run through the machine. Now, another thing that I recommend having when you're batch creating is a piercing tool like the one I have here, because the more you use a die, the more the cardstock's going to want to stick inside of the die. That's just the way it works, and so it's good to have a piercing tool to be able to pop out those die cuts quickly and easily. Now, if you really get serious about batch creating, you could have two sets of plates. So you can set up one with some dies and cardstock while the other's going through the machine and then swap it out. Another thing you can do is what I did here, which is I ran a bunch of dies through, then I pulled them all off the plate and I'm running something else through. And while that's running through, I'm popping all the pieces out of the dies because they tend to get stuck after lots of use. So really, once you get into the rhythm of batch creating, you can find ways to really make the most of your passes through the die cut machine. Again, fill up those plates with as many dies as you can. And by the way, this Empress machine does come with plates that are twice this size, so you could really put a lot through the machine at once, but I like to stick with this regular size. Okay, now another thing that I always do, but you do not have to do, is I double up my die cuts. So I did a ton of die cutting and I glued two of each together. I like that dimension. I like how it looks, but you can stick with one layer die cuts if you prefer. So all the die cuts you see here are doubled up. What I like to do is a bunch of die cutting and I put them into one of these containers and I sit in front of a movie and glue them together so that they're ready to go when I create the next day. All right, so now I'm taking all of the same color green leaves and laying them out on my Altenew sticky mat. That mat will kind of hold the die cuts in place as I do a bunch of inking. I'm using an ink blending brush and Concord and Ninth dye ink to put some shading. Now this is parsley colored cardstock and I'm applying parsley colored ink, so it just gives a tone on tone. Notice that I am not taking much time or effort to blend this. This ink is very forgiving and it'll smooth out on its own as it dries. I'm just putting a bit of this darker ink kind of towards the base of the leaves. Also, you really don't have to do this precise because we're going to have a lot of things layered together, so a lot of it will be covered up, and we're just looking to add the look of dimension by adding this darker shading. So now I've moved on to my evergreen cardstock. This is from Concord and Ninth also, and I'm applying the evergreen ink on it. If you want higher contrast, you could always use a lighter cardstock with a much darker ink, and that will give you more contrast, but I wanted something pretty subtle. Notice how working on a sticky mat like this is a huge help when you're batch creating, because otherwise you'd have to hold those leaves down with your finger as you're inking and move them out of the way and you'd have a mess. These sticky mats are very helpful. I will say that a lot of times when I do cards that are heavy on die cutting, like the flower cards I'm making here, I don't take the time to ink blend on it like this. I just love the look of assembled die cuts without the ink blending, but this time I thought it would add something to this bouquet of a card that we're creating. So you could skip the inking if you wanted to. Now at the center of these tiny flowers, I'm using an Altenew micro blending brush. This is a tiny brush that allows you to apply into tiny areas. So I'm putting fig ink at the center of these little fig flowers. Now it looks a little dark and harsh and sloppy here, but I promise that it'll dry and smooth out, and you'll see that in the final card results. But you can see how quick this is to apply thanks to having the right tools. When batch creating, it's important to have the right tools. You know, if you don't have them, that's okay. Create and find, you just go ahead and start creating and kind of think about what would be maybe helpful if you're going to do that a lot more. And then you can consider investing in other tools. All right, so now that I have done inking on my leaves, my flowers, here I'm putting a little bit of shading on the bottom of the little berries. It's time to start putting things together. I will say that Concord and Ninth is really good about having examples on their website and also on their packaging. So there's an example here that you can follow along with, in addition to those roadmap kind of dots that background die creates. I ended up putting a little bit more on mine, so it's a bit more full. So you'll see some added flowers and leaves here and there, but you definitely could just follow along with the example and that roadmap if you want to save time. And there you can see the roadmap and how it really matches up nicely with the example on the back of the packaging. I'm going to start by doing 3. Normally I would do more than this at once, but I really felt like this is what fit best on the screen. I am putting down the leaves first, the big leaves first, following that dotted road map on the background. I also have my model card or my guide card over off to the left. That's the hugs one I showed you before. Whenever I batch create, I create like my guide card or my model card, and I make sure I'm happy with it. And then I do all of my prep work around that. It really saves a lot of time to have that model card or guide card done first. Now, a few other tools that are really helpful when batch creating. One is working with a liquid adhesive that you know is strong and that you trust. I use Gina K Connect in a fine tip bottle. The reason I like to use liquid adhesive is it'll dry super strong and you get that wiggle room time to get the placement just right before you leave it to dry. Also, it's more cost effective when you're making a lot of cards to use liquid adhesive over tape runners or other options. Another tool that I find very helpful when batch creating is working on my magnetic glass work surface. That's the gray surface you see there in all of my videos. It's magnetic, so you see those yellow and white Sorry looking pawns from the game Sorry? Those are magnets. And so I can put something down and then put the magnet over it to hold it down as it dries. I also like using paperweights, which you'll see me use later on, but really anything heavy that you can put on it to make sure you're making good connection with your glue is very helpful. All right, so I'm going to continue to build on this. Here you can see I've added some other little leaves following the roadmap and the examples that we have. Then I move on to that large flower in the center because everything else is going to get kind of tucked around this. I put one foam square at the back center of these flowers. I normally don't like using foam squares like this because they don't hold up well in the mail, but these flowers are actually 4 layers thick because each of those pieces of the flower are doubled up. So I feel like it'll hold up in the mail fine because it's so thick. I then tucked in some yellow and purple flowers, and now it's time to add the berries on the little berry sprigs that I've added in. Now notice on the 2 cards on the right, I haven't added the berry sprig to the top left corner, but you can see that little piercing detail, right? So I know that I need to still place one there. So you can add more to it like I'm doing here, or simply follow along with that roadmap and what they have on the package. But boy, these are fun to make because they look like card bouquets when they're done. It's just fantastic. By the way, the color flowers that I did today were all scraps that I had. I collected all the scraps I had in similar colors so I could make multiples with them. These kind of cards are wonderful for using up scraps. Batch creating is great for using up scraps. Okay, so here are the 7 cards I made in this little crafty session. I am now adding the centers to the flowers. I am doing a white die cut with either a silver or gold matte die cut glued on top. Again, just adding to that dimension. These cards do have a lot of die cutting and do have a lot of dimension, but a lot of that is because I doubled things up and added extra flowers in. You definitely could minimize the amount of dimension by not doubling up the die cuts and just not putting in as many of the little filler bits and more really just following the example on the packaging instead. Another tool that's helpful with batch creating is the pickup stick tool that I'm using here. It has the piercing end, which I was using earlier when I die cut, and then it has this wax tip end that allows you to easily pick up tiny die cuts and place it into the adhesive. Super handy and so much easier to use, at least for me, than tweezers or trying to use my fingers. A big time saver. Now notice that those little flower clusters that are in the blue and the purple on these different cards, those little flower clusters, I wanted to have something at the center of them. I could use gemstones, I could use nothing, I could just leave as is, but instead I'm going to die cut tiny little dots for metallic cardstock. This is the Simon Says Stamp Bubble Burst background stamp. I'm cutting that from silver matte cardstock, and this creates a bunch of tiny little dots in different sizes. Now the background die cut here I can save for another project. I'm only using the little circles. Those little circles are great for the center of those tiny flowers. And in fact, little circles like this are great as little accents on cards. So if you're batch producing a card where you want to have a bunch of little like scattered gems, but you don't want to go through all of your gems making the cards, or you don't want the bulk, try doing this. Die cut tiny little circles or little diamonds or stars or something tiny from a matte gold or silver cardstock and add those as accents. Here I'm using them as the flower centers, but I thought I'd mention that these are great for those as an alternative for gemstones also. Now that I have a bunch of floral card fronts ready, let's create the back for these cards because these are shaped cards. So I used the background die without that like pierced roadmap center, and I'm placing it into my scoreboard. So that bottom row of leaves is right against the left edge of my scoreboard. I will do a score line on the other edge about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the top. Really doesn't matter how much. You could even go up to an inch if you wanted to. I will then flatten that out and put strong adhesive, you want something strong here, above that score line. I will place this on the back of our card front and put something heavy over the top edge of that while it dries. You want to make a good connection there. That score line that we created will be a hinge that allows this card to open and close. So I did this for all of our card fronts, and now I need a place to write my personal message on the inside. I could use a white gel pen on that green cardstock, but instead I'm cutting a white rectangle to fit on the inside. Instead of measuring, I'm using my pencil to make little tick marks on where I should cut it, and I will take that cardstock over to my trimmer and cut to that size. Then I will cut more white cardstock pieces of the same size, so I have a white rectangle to put in each of my cards. If you wanted to, you could do stamping on that white rectangle. You could even add some of your leftover flower or leaf die cuts, but I'm leaving mine plain today. Now it's time to add some sentiments. I actually only did sentiments on 2 of my cards. The rest I'm going to leave without a sentiment so that I can add it when an occasion comes up. Now for this one, I used a large hello die from Concord and Ninth. This is the set that I got it from. I really like this one because you can do hello there, for you, hello friend, lots of different ways you can use this, and it really spans across a card nicely. Oh, and by the way, this is on big time sale right now. So I die cut hello twice from white cardstock, and I'm gluing it together so it has some strength because it's going to go across this bumpy card. You can see over there on the left, I've already die cut hello there a bunch of times from white and black cardstock, so I have them ready. So anytime I need a hello sentiment, I can reach in there and I'm ready to go. So I have a lot of pre-cut words that I keep on hand. That is also helpful when batch creating. And by the way, I do all that die cutting when I feel my mojo's gone. It gives me something to keep my hands busy and prepares me for when my mojo is back. All right, so here is a completed card. I did trim the edge of the H and the O off a little bit, and I could put some flowers on the inside, but I'll think about that and add it later on. I really like how that hello goes right across all of those flowers, and we have so much fun dimension to this. Because the edge of the H and the O hang off, I will put this in a bigger envelope. This is a A6 envelope, but the overall size of that floral bouquet is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and it stands up wonderfully on display. I think I should go back to talking about prepping sentiments for when you're ready to use them. That's another way of batch creating. Oftentimes, if I'm not feeling creative, I will batch create sentiments so they're ready to go, and look how handy it was to just grab those already put together and add them to our card. I tend to do batch creating of sentiments that are greetings that I use a lot, like hello, take care, thank you, big hugs, and so on. So here are the 2 blue cards. The other one I'm going to leave without a sentiment for now, and when I have an occasion pop up, I can add whatever I need to add. Now these cards stand very nicely on their own. Once again, they're 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, so I can put these in a regular envelope because I didn't have anything really hanging off the edge. And you can see how adding the ink to those die cuts does add a bit of interest to the card, but you could totally skip it if you wanted to. Now the rest of them, I kept the sentiment off, but I just thought I'd show you how putting a matching envelope with your card really changes up the feel of it. These are all pretty much the same card, but I use different envelopes with them, which changes the look up a bit. Don't forget that colored envelopes really are such a great way to finish off your cards. You put all this time and effort into the cards. Spending just a little bit extra on the envelope so that it's pretty is really a nice touch. All right, so there we have batch creating of some floral cards. And I love these. I plan to do so many more of them. Okay, now it's time to move on to graduation cards. I made, I think, 33 of these to give to my son's friends. I've been saving up for giving these gifts. It's just something that I was very excited to do. So here's a look at the card first. This was very inspired by my friend Greg, who owns Concord and Ninth. I went live with him a few weeks ago, and he had a card idea that was kind of similar to this. I will link to that video up here in the top right, at the end of this video, and in the description below. But I kind of changed things up a bit and made a bunch of these trophies that hold money. Now keep in mind, this doesn't have to be a graduation card. You could put like world's greatest teacher or world's greatest mom on the trophy and change it up completely. I will show some examples of that a little bit later on. Using some of the tips I shared before, I did a bunch of die cutting off screen, and I have all these pieces ready to go. For the background, I'm using the Concord and Ninth Sunburst die. This is one of my most used background dies because it just adds some fun interest. You could even use it on the front of a note card. Now here I have some green cardstock that I've cut to be slightly smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'll run it through my die cut machine with that die, and I'm also cutting some other little pieces because again, you're sending that through your die cut machine, you might as well fill up those plates. So now you can see that fun detail that we have on the background. Now we can add this onto our card bases. I have a bunch of top folding white note cards that are 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I always keep a lot of those on hand. I'll sit down, spend a couple hours making a ton of card bases, and then I'll have them ready to go for a couple months. Definitely worth the effort. So I'm putting a double-sided adhesive sheet on the back of each of our green panels, and then I'll put these on the white note card. The reason I'm using a full adhesive sheet here is because there's a bit of texture to this because of that sunburst texture we did, and this will make sure that it glues down smoothly. And by the way, you'll notice that my light gets a little weird in the video here. My mother-in-law was in town and we were crafting together, and we decided to have extra lights on so we could see better, and I had the window open, so the lighting isn't great, and I'm very sorry about that. It will get better a little bit later on. Now this card does have a tiny bit of stamping that you did it that's along the bottom of the trophy. I thought I'd take this opportunity to show you some tips for batch stamping. So I die cut a bunch of white sentiment strips. This is from a Hero Arts stamp and die set. Really any sentiment strip die would work, just these long narrow white rectangles. I cut a bunch of them, and then I kept the negative space from one of them. And I put that negative space in my Misty stamping tool that has a waffle flower grip mat in it, which holds that in place. I'll pop one of the die cuts into that negative space and then stamp on it. This You Did It is from a Concord and Ninth turnabout stamp set. I just thought it looked nice there on the bottom of the trophy. I love to dig through old stamps and find ways to use them along with newer products. So once you get going, you'll get into a rhythm where you can just pop each die cut in place and stamp it. This is much faster than stamping a bunch of things and then using the die to cut them out individually. You can get a lot more done in a lot less time. You can also see again a tool that is helpful when batch stamping is that grip mat that is inside of my Misty stamping tool that holds that cardstock and the die cut in place as we do the stamping, and I don't have to fuss with tape or magnets. Okay, so I can put all those pre-stamped pieces into a little tray and move on to my next step, which is assembling the trophies themselves. Now for these trophies, I use the Concord and Ninth World's Greatest die set. You can see it over there on the right. There is a stamp set available that coordinates. I will use the little MVP image later on in this video, but for this card, I'm only using the trophy elements. Notice that the different dies and stamps in here allow you to make trophies for different occasions. And I got this from the Concord and Ninth website. They said I could share it with you. Look at all of the different kind of styles that you can get. So I am definitely making a graduation theme today, but you could change it up by putting flowers on it, doing different kinds of sentiments on it. Really is a fun, versatile die set. I'm really digging these kind of fun theme cards lately. It's just different than the typical flowers that I do a lot of. So I die cut the trophy many times from white cardstock, and I'm gluing 2 die cuts together. As I mentioned, I really like that added dimension and the look that it gives, but you totally could do 1 layer if you prefer. Now I do like to put something heavy on top of it while it dries. I used the magnets earlier. Here I'm using a crystal weight, just anything heavy to make sure that glue is secure. So I doubled up a bunch of trophies, and on half of them, I'm going to cut the handle off, close to the handle, about 1/4 inch from the handle on both sides, and I'll cut the bottom off. I'm using my favorite new small scissors. These are the Tim Holtz recoil scissors. They're fantastic for fussy cutting and cutting through thick cardstock that's doubled up like this. Now on the back of one of my solid trophies, I'm gluing these pieces that we just cut off of another one. So I'm gluing the handles on the back of this and the bottom of the trophy on the back of it. The reason I'm doing that is this is going to be a pocket where I can tuck the money into that open area there in the center. So we have the added dimension by the handles and at the base, but that center area is open there, so we have a nice pocket for the money. You could even tuck a gift card in a little bit, but money works great. Okay, so I made a bunch of white trophies like that, and I'm setting those aside. Now let's do the front of the trophy. I use the same trophy die to cut many times from gold matte cardstock. I also used another sentiment strip die that's slightly bigger than the one we used before to cut from silver matte cardstock, and I'm gluing this along the bottom of each of those trophies. Now this silver is going to be covered up a lot by those You Did It strips in just a moment, but I love adding these details to a card, especially when I'm batch creating, because even though I'm making 33 of these cards, I'm putting a lot of effort into each, so it really looks special in the end. Each card looks special. So after I put those silver strips down, I trimmed them off the edge, and then onto that I'll glue the You Did It, and I'll trim that around the edge. Now the trophy does have another layer, which is like the cup only that you can put on the top, and I decided to do this on some of the trophies. I then kind of ran out of gold cardstock, so I skipped it on others. But notice I'm using tape runner here. The reason I'm doing so is liquid adhesive takes a bit longer to dry when you're using matte cardstock or a slick cardstock, and also sometimes you can see the texture of the liquid adhesive through the matte cardstock. It kind of shows through, so using tape runner is a better option. All right, so now we can add our trophies onto our card bases. Now I'm only putting adhesive on the handles and the bottom of the trophy, not in that pocket area. I will then place that onto our background. This means we'll have that pocket at the top of our trophy where we can tuck our money in. Now I do like to put something heavy on it while it dries, and we can move on to the next one. I'll tell you, putting cards together like this is really enjoyable. If you've never done batch creating of any kind of card, I encourage you to try it because there's something therapeutic about the repetitive actions. Next, I'm going to add the year to the trophies. I'm using the Concord and 9th All the Number dies, which is on big time sale. There's also an alphabet die set that matches. Now, personalizing cards with a date or a name is always something to make a card extra special. And in this case, I'm doing the graduation year. But you could do like 23 on a cake for a 23rd birthday card. Many ways you can personalize. So off screen, I die cut 2024 many times from white cardstock. I glued 3 of each number together because I really wanted dimension on them. These cards will be handed to the recipients, so I didn't have to worry about having a lot of bulk on this. So I went to town stacking 3 together. Next, I'm using my Brutus Monroe stick and stamp mat to hold the numbers in place. I'm lining them up along one of the black lines, and then I'm getting the spacing just right. So I'm holding it there on that stick and stamp mat. Then I'm taking a piece of masking tape and picking up those numbers from the sticky mat. Then I can flip it over and put adhesive along the back. Again, I'm sorry about the light reflection there. I'm using strong liquid adhesive on this, and then I will place this onto our gold trophy, and I'll leave the tape on there. Now notice how I can easily see through it to get it centered on my trophy, and the spacing is just right on those numbers because I use the sticky mat. I'll leave the tape on there until it dries. Remember, I'm gluing onto a slick cardstock, that gold mat, so I want to give it some extra time. I'll just leave it there an extra few minutes. Then I can move on to the next one. I'll put the 2024 down, making sure it's lined up, and use the tape to pick it up, put adhesive on the back, and place it on the card. Now you'll notice some of my numbers have silver die cut on top. I started doing them and then I decided to add it on after I glued it on the trophy. That's why some have the silver on it now. They'll all get it in just a moment. Okay, after I gave that some time to dry on all of the cards, I can carefully pull back the satin tape. The best way to remove tape without tearing is to pull it back on itself, as you see me do here. Also move slowly. I had no trouble with any tearing with any of these. Now, once I've done that for each of the cards, I can glue on top of that a silver matte number die cut. So again, this has tons of dimension. I'm going to town with dimension, but I'm hand delivering it so that doesn't bother me. If I were to mail this, I definitely would put it in a padded envelope because you want it to get there safely. And now for the final touches, I'm adding a bunch of die cut stars. I used an older Hero Arts star confetti background die. You can see it there over on the right. It cuts a background of stars. I'll keep the background for something else. I'm just using the little stars that fall out on the card. I cut this from silver matte cardstock and from yellow cardstock, and I'm gluing those kind of scattered on the background. I also have some larger stars that I did from yellow cardstock from the Altenew Layered Star die set. It's one that I reach for often because it cuts a bunch of different sizes of stars. So look through your stash and see what little shapes you can use. Instead of using gems or pearls here or sequins, I'm just using little die cut stars, kind of like we did little die cut circles earlier in this video. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention, I chose these colors because it is the school colors of all the kids that are getting these cards, so that's another way these cards are personalized. So you can see how easy it is to add these little die cuts using the pickup stick tool and a little drop of liquid adhesive. The final touch is a sentiment to go across the 2024 trophy, and I use the Concord and 9th Bravo die set. You can see there on the bottom right, there's a congrats word. These are on big time sale. By the way, these stamps and dies can be used together to create a bunch of like award ribbons and bookmarks and such. I actually have die cut a ton of these from white cardstock so that I can create a bunch of these over the summer to give to teachers when we get back to school. But for now, I'm using the congrats die, and I cut it a bunch of times from white cardstock, and I glued 3 die cuts together. Again, I'm going for a lot of dimension. I'll put liquid glue on the back of the congrats stacked die cuts, and I'll place that across the 2024 trophy. I want to make sure the C and the S connect to the handles of the trophy because the handles sit a little bit lower. So I'm using my magnets on both ends, and then I put my crystal block standing up right at the center just to make sure that this is connecting to that trophy and it doesn't fall off later on. So you can see how I just move the magnets and the paperweight from card to card as they dry. Now it's time to add the money, and here's a little tip. This is a big one. Whenever I put money in a card, I go to the bank and I ask for new crisp bills. It always looks better than having like a beat up old dollar bill in there instead. It looks nice to have a crisp new one. So I kind of folded it up in a fun way, and I can tuck it into that little pocket and cross my fingers that they see the money in the front. No, actually, I put a message on the inside about, spend this money on gas money or, whatever. So they're pretty much aware of it. But after asking a bunch of my son's friends, they all had no problem spotting that money on the front. Now, a gift card kind of fits into this trophy, but it would have to stick out more from the top, and I just think it looks great with money or even a check inside. I also think this is a great way to give a birthday gift too. You could do like world's greatest daughter or whatever. Let's face it, a lot of people prefer to have cash so they can have it on hand the next time they want to treat themselves. Okay, now for my third set of cards I created. I think I did 40 of these in total. Now these also use some older Concord and 9th products. And by the way, I didn't do these because of the sale. I just was really excited to find out there was a sale on everything I was using. So this is the Concord and 9th Kids Are Grand die set. There are layering elements for a star, a sun, a flower, a heart, a little trophy, and then some additional dies. There is a stamp set that coordinates with it, but I'm just using the die set to get today. And I thought I'd show you what Concord and 9th has on their website on how those pieces go together. So I'll be using the trophy on today's cards. I'm really liking this trophy theme, if you can't tell. I also used Simon Says Stamp Brushed Flowers stamp set. I thought the "You're the Best" sentiment in there looked nice underneath the trophy. And by the way, I warn you, this is where my lighting gets really bad. I didn't realize that it was set up this way, and I apologize, but it's not for long, I promise. Now, I did start by cutting a bunch of white faux stitch rectangles using the Gina K Designs Master 2 Layouts die set. I love her Master Layouts die sets because they're useful, practical shapes, and the die sets include a die that creates a slightly bigger matting piece. I'm not using that today, just using the faux stitched rectangle. Now, I cut it many times from white cardstock. I've already stamped "You're the Best" with black cardstock, and now I'm stamping little stars that will go in the trophy once I add the trophy die cut on top. Now, I'm once again choosing the colors of the teachers that these are going to, and I did the green for the first set of stars, and I'm shifting that star image down and stamping it again in yellow. By the way, this star image is from the coordinating stamp set for the die set I'm using. It's a much older set, but you could really use any tiny little hearts or stars or dots, or even just have little sequins coming out of the trophy. To save time, I'm doing the green and yellow stars because I'm making so many, but I will add a few gold sequence stars coming out also. So after I stamped these on all of the elements, it's time to add my trophies. Now, the trophies I created with 2 shades of yellow cardstock for the 2 layers of the trophy. I could have used gold cardstock, but at this point I had run out, so I went with the yellow. I also tied some gold string around the base of each. This was inspired by a card example I saw over on the Concord and Ninth website. I just felt like that little bow of gold thread added some interest to the card. But it's still a pretty simple card design. By the way, I was able to do all the die cutting of this card in one pass. I cut the white rectangle, the 2 layers of the trophies, and my green starburst background, which I'll add in a moment, all in one pass through the die cut machine. So it really isn't that much die cutting on this one, so they come together pretty quickly. Okay, so after I did the little bow and with the gold thread, I did put a little dot of liquid adhesive on the knot. That'll dry clear, but it'll keep that bow from coming unraveled. Now it's time to add a little sparkle. So mixed in with those little stamp stars, I'm using Trinity Stamps Gold Stars. These are fantastic. They are flat and they capture the light so much. They have so much shine to them. You can see in that little container up there. So there are 3 sizes of stars in here, and I just glued a few of them mixed up in the stars over the trophy. This really steps up the card because they catch the light so nicely and add a lot of sparkle. And it doesn't take much time to add them, and there's no bulk. They do have stars and other sequins shapes with this no bulk look over at Trinity Stamps. I encourage you to check them out. They have a lot of great options. Okay, over on the right, you can see I've already got my card bases set up just like I did on my last card set. So all I'm going to do is glue these white rectangles onto those green backgrounds. I didn't add any dimension behind it just to save time, but you could if you wanted to. One last thing, I used this Concord and Ninth World's Greatest Bundle. Remember I showed you this earlier. On the bottom of that stamp set, there's a little MVP. So I thought I'd stamp that on the trophy just to add a little more fun, but you could stamp a variety of little images on there. Now, I did think of this after I assembled all of my cards, but that's okay. I'll just pop all of them in and just stamp with a darker yellow ink right onto the trophy. You can see how helpful it is to have a stamping tool anytime you're batch creating. So here is one of my batches of this card design. The first round went to teachers. This round is going to Young Life leaders that have helped my son over the years. And I will put a gas gift card on the inside. Now you'll notice that sometimes my green cardstocks are different in the background. That's because I was using what I had. I used different shades of green and it worked out just fine. And check out the sparkle of those simple little gold star sequins that we put on top. Adds so much to this because it catches a light and gives us that shine. Oh, and then I did go back and make even more of these because they were so much fun. And I had all the supplies out, and these will be going to teachers next year. So I hope these tips of watching batch creating are helpful to you. Before we go, I did want to talk about some of the things that are on sale. Now, I normally don't show this, but I was actually doing all of these cards, creating this video, and telling Greg, the owner of Concord and Ninth, about it. And he said, hey, guess what? There's a big sale coming up, and it's all the things that I used will be on big time sale. So I'm just going to share this here, and I'm showing here some things that are on big time sale. Everything I'm showing from here on out, I think, is 50% off or more. And I will share examples that I made with those products. And in the description below, I will have links to each of these videos. So if you're interested in buying any of these products on sale, you can get inspiration right away. I'm hoping this is helpful to you to kind of pull this all together because there's a lot on sale. So I thought I'd show you some of my favorites. This is definitely one of the bigger sales of the years, and I love Concord and Ninth products. Okay, first up is the Much Love. There's a background die and stencils you can buy together or separately. It's on big time sale. I actually did a video that was batch creating again, where I made a ton of cards in different ways with pattern paper, stamping, and much more using these products. And again, the link for that will be in the description below. I also, by the way, have a visual supply list link below. You can click that. It'll open up thumbnails of all the products and the videos I talk about. Next up, we have the Triple Step Blooming Heart stamp set. I love this one when it came out so much that I did a video with lots of card examples, and I'll show some of them here. These cards actually have this stamped heart, and I die cut it, and that heart flips open to show a message underneath. Now, the nice thing about this stamp is you stamp it 3 times in 3 different colors, and you build that beautiful image very quickly. Along the same lines, we have the Triple Step Autumn Leaf Bundle. You can buy these together or separately. You can see how you stamp those 3 layers together to get a leaf shape, or you could use the die and inlay the little die cut shapes. I did a video showing many different card examples where the leaf swings over to the side to reveal a personal message. And in the video, I show stamped versions and die cut versions. Next up, we have the Threads of Kindness products. There's a stamp set, a die set, and stencils, and you can buy them together or separately. This is on big time sale. Now, this one I love because it has some basic stitching to the die, but you can skip it if you want. So here, I just use the stencils without the stitching holes. So there's no stitching on this, and you can see how adorable that is, as is. Or you can add the stitching to it, which I did here. Doesn't take long to do this stitching. In fact, I'm heading on vacation and I die cut a bunch of these and already stenciled them, and all I need to do is add the stitching on as I go. Next, we have an oldie but goodie. This is the CRAFTY die set from Concord and Ninth. It has all the elements you need to create some buttons, scissors, a faux postage, a paintbrush, a rubber stamp, a needle and thread, so many ways you can use it, and they also have other products that coordinate with it nicely. Next, we have the Picture Perfect die set. This is a large die set that creates a 3-dimensional camera and little pictures that come out of the camera. So there's a little drawer that you can have little mini cards in. It's so much fun. This one was really popular, and I did a video showing a few ways you can use it. And here's the little camera that I made with a little mini note card and a gift card inside. Really fun to create something 3-dimensional out of your cardstock. Here we have the Concord and Ninth Downtown Stacks dies. These allow you to create a little downtown scene with little houses and buildings. There's trees, there's a bus, there's a car, there's even little banners that you can stamp greetings on. I did a video where I showed how to make these pop up when you open a card. Really fun to assemble and great for those of us who like to put little die cuts together. Now, those are just some of the things that are on sale. There's a lot on sale. These are big time on sale, as are some of the products that I used in today's video. They're all on sale, but some are at a huge discount. I hope this was helpful to you because I know that this hobby can be expensive sometimes, and this is a great opportunity to save while building your stash. I do have a link below to all of the sales items at Concord and Ninth. Now's a great time to check them out. And I have links for all the supplies and videos I mentioned in this video. At the end here, I'll link to a couple other related videos and a link to my blog post where you can see much more about everything I talked about. I thank you for spending this time with me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.